The ballroom of the National Conference Center was shining under the bright TV lights. Red, white, and blue banners hung along the walls. The air was full of excitement, cameras flashing, phones recording, and political figures moving through. The room like chess pieces. Reporters whispered predictions, and staffers held tight schedules in their hands. It was supposed to be a night of unity for the Republican Party. Former President Donald Trump had just finished his speech on immigration, getting loud applause and a standing ovation. As he left the stage, the crowd was still buzzing. Nice. President J.D. Vance, young and sharp, was next to speak. He adjusted his tie, stepped up to the podium, and began thanking the audience. He had only spoken a few words when the tone of the night took a strange turn. A journalist from Patriot Press raised their hand. The moderator nodded. "This question is for Mr. Pence," the journalist said, looking toward the front row. "You've seen J.D. Vance work closely with President Trump. How would you describe his role?" All eyes turned to former Vice President Mike Pence. He gave a slow smile, polite but stiff. He stood up slowly and took the mic from the moderator. "J.D. is very loyal to Donald Trump," Pence said, with a pause that felt just a second too long. "But the question I ask and many Americans are asking is this: does he ever make his own decisions? Or is he just Trump's puppet?" Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Cameras turned instantly. The crowd froze. Some whispered, others just stared. J.D. Vance stood still at the podium, his expression unchanged. Pence continued, his voice slightly louder now. "This country needs leadership with a spine, not someone who follows behind, hoping to catch leftover applause. J.D., you don't lead, you follow. You lack the courage to stand on your own." Silence. Reporters stopped typing. Security guards at the back of the room stiffened. Even the moderator seemed unsure what to do next. For a long second, J.D. Vance didn't say a word. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He just stared at Pence with a calm, steady gaze that seemed to cut through the air like a knife. Then, slowly, Vance stepped away from the podium, walking closer to the front edge of the stage. He looked directly at Pence. The tension was unbearable. He leaned into the microphone. And in a voice low but clear, he said, "Mike, you call me a puppet. But what do you call a man who abandoned the people who trusted him?" The entire room seemed to inhale at once. A woman near the front dropped her glass. Somewhere in the back, a news anchor mouthed, "Oh my God." Pence's smile faded. His face stiffened. His hands gripped the armrest of his chair. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Then the crowd erupted. Some clapped, some shouted. Others just sat in stunned silence, watching as the camera crews tried to figure out who to focus on. Vance didn't wait for applause. He turned, walked calmly back to the podium, and continued his speech as if nothing had happened. Behind the scenes, campaign staff rushed to phones. News producers began cutting emergency packages for TV. Social media exploded with hashtags like #PuppetComment and #VanceStrikesBack. In the VIP lounge, Trump reportedly smirked and said, "That's my guy." Pence remained seated for a while. His smile was gone. His team whispered to him, trying to guide him away from reporters. But he waved them off, staring at the stage. Vance's voice echoed through the ballroom again, but now the tone had changed. No longer was he just another speaker. He had become the center of the storm. As the event continued, a quiet conversation took place at the far end of the room. A woman in a black suit, Vance's legal advisor, slipped through the crowd and handed him a sealed red folder. He nodded, tucked it under his arm, and walked off the stage at the end of the event without another word. No one knew what was in that folder, but the war of words had only just begun. You said J.D. Vance stood in the hallway behind the ballroom, the sealed red folder still under his arm. Around him, aides whispered into earpieces and reporters pushed through staffers for quotes. Team kept their formation tight, protective, alert. Vance didn't speak. He just kept walking, calm but unreadable. Inside the VIP lounge, Mike Pence sat quietly. His advisors circled him like vultures. Someone was showing him tweets on a phone, but he waved it away. That was no accident, Pence said under his breath. He was waiting for it. Outside the lounge, cable news channels were already looping the exchange. Every headline read, "Like a punch, Vance hits back. Puppet no more. It's GOP civil war on live TV." At CNN, an emergency political panel had been called. The host, Megan Castor, turned to her guest. "Is this the moment the Republican Party splits for good?" "It could be," the guest replied. What Vance just did. He challenged the last vice president of the United States on loyalty, on character, in front of the nation. That's no small thing. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled room upstairs in the conference center, a quiet, more dangerous conversation was happening. 3 senior GOP donors sat across from a digital strategist from Florida, one of Vance's closest operatives. The strategist placed a tablet on the table and played the video again, and they watched it in silence. After the playback, one of the donors leaned back. "He hit hard," he said. "But if this becomes a loyalty test to Trump, we'll lose the moderates." The strategist smiled thinly. This wasn't about Trump. That line, about January 6th, Scott wasn't rehearsed. That was personal. There was a beat of silence. Then someone else asked, "What's in the folder?" No one answered. Across town, in a nondescript law office, the woman who had handed Vance the red folder, Samantha Rio, sat across from a federal intelligence analyst. Files were spread across the table. Wire transfers, travelogues, and a list of encrypted messages flagged from a private communication app. One name appeared too many times: Pence. "We verified the metadata," the analyst said, tapping a message dated January 4th, 2 days before the Capitol riot. He met with 2 former committee members off record. The location was a church basement in Arlington. Not listed in the visitor logs, Samantha scanned the page. "Is this folder enough to push him out?" The analyst looked hesitant. "It's enough to scare him. But if you want to go public?" "No," she said sharply. "Not yet." Back at the conference center, J.D. Vance finally arrived at a private suite where a post-event panel was about to begin. Caroline Leavitt, now a rising star in conservative media, was already seated, flipping through notes. She looked up as he entered. "You made your move," she said softly. "I didn't plan it," he replied. Caroline gave a dry smile. "Didn't stop it either." The lights dimmed as cameras went live again. Vance straightened his blazer and looked into the lens. On the far end of the control room, a producer gestured to begin. Across the screen, the cheer-on read, "Exclusive. J.D. Vance responds after Pence firestorm." The interviewer began gently. "Senator Vance, tonight you found yourself in a verbal battle with former Vice President Pence. Can you clarify what you meant when you said he abandoned those who trusted him?" Vance didn't blink. "I meant exactly that. Stand with the voters who felt betrayed. People who believed that when things got dangerous, their leaders would stand firm. Instead, some vanished." The host hesitated. "You're referring to January 6th. "I'm referring to every moment after it," Vance said, "when it became easier to condemn than to understand. Easier to disappear than to lead." From the control room, one of the producers turned pale. "Phones are going crazy," she whispered. "The White House just asked for a full transcript." Across the country, Pence watched from a hotel room in Virginia. Alone now, silent, his phone lit up with a call from a blocked number. He didn't answer. On the screen, Vance continued, his voice cold and calm. "This country is tired of cowards in nice suits pretending to be bold. I've never claimed to be perfect. But I never left." The segment ended, but the war had just begun. The folder was now in a private safe in Vance's office. Inside, it wasn't just information, it was a weapon, and Pence knew it. The sun hadn't even risen the next morning when every major network in America lit up with one question. What does J.D. Vance have on Mike Pence? The red folder had become a mystery across political Twitter. Rumors were everywhere encrypted. Messages, secret meetings, even talk of backroom deals with foreign diplomats. But no one could confirm anything, not even Vance's closest allies. Inside the Capitol, the Senate hall was quiet. J.D. Vance walked in without speaking to reporters. His face was calm, but his phone buzzed nonstop in his pocket. Messages from journalists, threats from anonymous numbers, and a missed call from an old friend at Homeland Security. He didn't answer any of them. In the office of Majority Whip Harold Brennan, a private conversation took place behind a locked door. Brennan, a longtime Republican insider, looked pale as he watched the clip from the night before for the fifth time. "He blindsided Pence," Brennan muttered, scrolling through Vance's social media profile. And he knew what he was doing. Across from him sat Eleanor Wade, a former CIA liaison turned political fixer. She leaned forward, folding her hands. "I warned you," she said. "He's not Trump's puppet. He's something else. Vance plays the long game." Brennan exhaled. "You think he's trying to replace Trump?" "No," Wade replied. "I think he's trying to replace everyone." Meanwhile, in a dark studio just outside Atlanta, Caroline Leavitt sat down for a podcast interview. She leaned into the microphone, her tone serious. What people forget is that Pence was never challenged by his own. Until now. J.D. didn't shout. He didn't insult. He just told the truth, and Pence had no answer. The host, stunned, asked, "Are you saying Vance should lead the GOP?" Caroline paused. "I'm saying he already is." Back in Washington, Pence had locked himself in a meeting with his private counsel. The television played silently in the background. A news anchor showed a blurry photo of the red folder and pointed to a graphic titled, "What's Inside Vance's Secret File?" Pence's lawyer was firm. "We need to get ahead of this. If Vance has digital logs from your January 6th contacts, they'll bury me," Pence snapped. "That's what this is. Revenge for the hearing I blocked last year." He stood, fists clenched. "I carried this party through fire, and now a junior senator wants to write my legacy with one sentence." But he didn't sound angry anymore. He sounded afraid. That night, J.D. Vance met quietly with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. No cameras, tea, no press. Only one photo was leaked: Trump, smiling, his hand on Vance's shoulder. By morning, that photo was front page. Trump endorses Vance. At the White House, National Security Advisor Luis Moreno read through an emergency memo flagged as urgent political instability risk. It contained a troubling suggestion that Vance's folder included not only Pence's communications, but also partial transcripts from a private EU's meeting on Ukraine funding. Dated 2 months before the Capitol riot, Moreno blinked hard. How would he have this? A voice from the other end of the secure line replied quietly, "There's one more thing. He hasn't released it yet. But Vance's team just requested clearance to declassify documents under the vice president's discretionary power." Moreno's hands tightened. Only 3 people in government could approve that clearance. And J.D. Vance was now one of them. Across town, Samantha Rios, the same woman who had handed Vance the red folder, sat inside a windowless basement office at the Justice Department. She met with a federal investigator in secret. He tapped a document with a redacted section. "You do realize if this comes out, Pence won't just lose his legacy? He could face charges." Samantha looked him in the eye. So could others. Back at the Capitol, J.D. Vance stood before a mirror in the Senate bathroom. He adjusted his tie slowly, deliberately. It was no longer just reacting to Pence's insult. He was preparing for what came next. And he knew the storm wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. The Capitol dome stood like a ghost against the gray morning sky. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. No more smiles in hallways. No lighthearted jokes by the elevators. Something had cracked and everyone could feel it. J.D. Vance walked through the marble corridor, flanked by two aides. His expression was unreadable. Reporters snapped photos, but he said nothing. Upstairs, a closed-door meeting was already underway. Intelligence Committee members had received a classified update flagged as Tier 1 domestic risk. A single name was typed across the top: Vice President J.D. Vance. "Is this about Ukraine?" asked Senator Claire McDonough. The room went silent. "No," replied a gray-suited analyst from the NSA. "This is about the Pence file." "And where Vance got it?" The analyst clicked a remote and a black and white video played on the screen. A man in a suit entered an embassy in Geneva, Switzerland. The timestamp: 2 weeks before the Capitol riot. The man's face wasn't clear, but his voice, captured on an encrypted mic, was unmistakable. It was Mike Pence. He was there for a private dinner with a European finance official, the analyst explained. "We believe he was negotiating the terms of a post-election contingency plan without full authorization." A chill moved through the room. "Was this treason?" McDonough whispered. "That depends," said the analyst. "On who finds out first, us or Vance?" Meanwhile, Pence was holed up in a Virginia estate owned by a longtime donor. His inner circle had narrowed to 3. He hadn't spoken to the press in 36 hours. "It's going to leak it," Pence said, pacing. His attorney, Devin Rouse, nodded slowly. "If he does, you're finished. But if you go on offense, deny, redirect, you might survive." Pence slammed a fist against the desk, turned one sentence into a damn rebellion. Back in D.C., Vance met secretly with former NSA whistleblower Julian Cortez, now working in cybersecurity consulting. They sat in a secure room inside a Georgetown townhouse. Vance laid the red folder on the table. Cortez raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to open this door? These kinds of files don't just ruin careers, they bury people." Vance didn't blink. "I'm not afraid." Cortez sighed. "That's what scares me." Outside, protesters had begun gathering with signs that read, "Trump 2.0. No thanks, and Vance equals shadow government." But inside conservative media circles, Vance was becoming a hero. Tucker Carlson played the clip of his comeback to Pence on loop. "He didn't just clap back," Tucker said. "He cut through the lies. The old guard is dying. And J.D. Vance is holding the shovel." At the same time, MSNBC ran a panel accusing Vance of authoritarian ambition. "This is how strongmen rise," said one anchor. "With charisma, data leaks, and a loyal base willing to believe anything." As night fell, Vance appeared live on Fox News. The host leaned forward, clearly nervous but curious. "Senator Vance, will you confirm the contents of the red folder?" Vance smiled faintly. "Let me put it this way. There are things the American people deserve to know. And there are people who've been protected for far too long." The host asked again. "So you're saying Pence, Vance, cut in?" "I'm saying truth matters, even if it burns the house down." The line echoed across social media like thunder. Within minutes, it was trending. #BurnTheHouseDown. Meanwhile, inside a Pentagon secure room, General Monica Riker reviewed a secondary file labeled Shadow Liaisons. It listed 3 names tied to the Geneva meeting Pence attended. One of them belonged to a former NATO diplomat, now a consultant for a military contractor linked to Ukraine aid shipments. General Riker called the White House directly. "I have a breach, not just of trust, but of command integrity." Vice President Vance, she warned, was playing a dangerous game, and he might win. Elsewhere, Pence's camp scrambled. Leaks had started surfacing unconfirmed reports that Vance would present his folder to the Oversight Committee within days. Pence's final hope was to strike first. His team arranged a major televised address at the Reagan Library in California. Topic: the future of the conservative movement. But everyone knew what it really was: an attempt to save his name. That night, J.D. Vance walked alone to the Lincoln Memorial, bundled in a dark coat as rain began to fall. A reporter spotted him and shouted a question. "Senator, are you taking down the party or saving it?" Vance turned slightly. "I'm just showing people what it's become." Then he disappeared into the shadows. The Reagan Library was wrapped in security. Armed agents lined the perimeter. Inside, the room was packed, every chair taken, every camera blinking red. A stage was set for redemption or collapse. Mike Pence adjusted his tie backstage. He had rehearsed every word. This wasn't just a speech, it was a lifeline. His aides paced quietly, murmuring updates about the Vance situation. The Oversight Committee just confirmed Vance requested a closed-door session tomorrow. One aide said. Pence didn't answer. He simply stared into the mirror, his reflection split by the frame's gold trim. At the same hour in D.C., J.D. Vance sat in a dim room beneath the Capitol. The red folder, now locked inside a steel case, was in front of him. Across the table sat Representative Elijah Navarro, chair of the House Oversight Committee. Navarro leaned forward. "If you go public, you're not just exposing Pence. You're opening the gates on half the Republican establishment. Are you ready for that?" Vance's hands were clasped tightly. They already burned the bridge. "Just walking across the ashes." Navarro said nothing for a long moment, then finally asked, "And Trump? Is he behind this?" Vance's answer came slowly. "He doesn't need to be." Back in California, Pence took the stage. The crowd rose for a polite standing ovation, but the energy was uncertain, fragmented. Even among allies, there was hesitation now. Pence opened strong canding. Political extremism, calling for civility, reminding the audience of conservative principles rooted in the Constitution. But then, his voice cracked. "I have never betrayed this country," he said. No applause, only cameras clicking. He looked down at his notes, suddenly realizing the narrative had shifted. He wasn't seen as a patriot anymore. He was seen as a man on the run, and Vance was waiting. At midnight, every major outlet began teasing a leak. CNN ran a chyron. Confidential dossiers linked Pence to covert intel talks in Europe. Fox News had a different tone. J.D. Vance warns of deep state revival files to be made public. By 1 a.m., journalists flooded social media with a rumor. The red folder contains encrypted logs of back-channel communications between Pence and foreign financial agents dating back before January 6th. Inside Pence's estate, alarms were going off. Lawyers yelled into phones. His former chief of staff whispered, "We need a deal." "We leaked something small, just enough to distract," but it was too late. J.D. Vance was already moving. The next morning, without fanfare, he arrived at Capitol Hill. There were no cameras, just silence. He carried the steel case under one arm. At the same time, news broke that a former NATO attaché who attended the Geneva dinner with Pence had fled to an undisclosed location in Luxembourg. Reporters screamed into microphones. What were they hiding? Was this sabotage of the incoming administration? Is Pence guilty of secret diplomacy? Meanwhile, in the oversight chamber, J.D. Vance unlocked the case. Representative Navarro and 3 top aides leaned in. Inside were 5 typed pages, stamped with a red triangle symbol used only for classified internal communications within the Joint Interagency Task Force. "These," Vance said quietly, "are the receipts." The documents included schedules, call transcripts, and one alarming email, Pence requesting European contingency asset freeze options, signed and timestamped 2 days before the Capitol riot. Navarro's face went pale. "If this gets out, it's not just a scandal, it's sedition." Outside, a growing group of protesters stood behind metal barricades. Some carried signs saying, "Puppets, expose the masters." Others demanded Pence be arrested. Social media had exploded overnight. TikTok, X, YouTube all carried the same video clip from Vance's earlier speech. "I followed truth. You followed fear." It had now reached 31 million views. That evening, Pence went silent. He canceled his next press event. Rumors circulated that he had hired an international crisis management team, some of the same names used during the Panama Papers fallout. But J.D. Vance, he stood in front of a quiet Lincoln statue and gave a short statement to the press. "Didn't come to destroy the party. I came to remove the rot. That means clearing the whole house, so be it." A young reporter asked, "Are you afraid this will divide conservatives forever?" Vance paused. "Only those who have something to hide should be afraid." Then he walked away, leaving a nation on edge. Tomorrow, the contents of the red folder would be made public, and America would never be the same. The sun had barely risen when the first page from the red folder was leaked. It was 6:03 a.m. Eastern Time. A single PDF titled Memorandum 12A, Contingency Finance Protocols. Geneva appeared on a whistleblower forum. Within 90 seconds, screenshots were everywhere. X, Reddit, Substack newsletters, and eventually breaking news tickers. The memo showed Pence communicating directly with a financial intermediary linked to Victor Lirin, a Russian oligarch sanctioned in 2021. The language was cryptic. But one line stood out. Ensure funds are redirected before the electoral certification. Liquidity must remain shielded offshore. By 6:15, every newsroom in D.C. was in panic mode. J.D. Vance was already in a studio at Newsline International, prepped for an exclusive live interview. As producers counted down, he leaned forward, hands clasped, his expression unreadable. 5 seconds, Senator, a voice said in his earpiece. Then the red light blinked on. Anchor Susan Lim wasted no time. "Senator Vance," she said, "the public has now seen the memo. Many are calling this financial treason." Former Vice President Mike Pence compromised. Vance didn't blink. "I believe Mike Pence acted in fear." But fear is no excuse for betrayal. Screen split Vance on one side. Footage of Pence's Geneva dinner in the background. His words sent ripples through social media instantly. Susan pushed harder. Did Donald Trump know? Vance hesitated only a moment. "No. And I'll say this clearly, if he had, I wouldn't be here defending him. I stand beside Trump because I believe in America first, not Geneva first." In an underground media room in Zurich, the team monitoring U.S. response sat frozen. A former Swiss banker whispered, if more documents go public, Lirin might flee. But back in D.C., it was Pence's former allies who were panicking. By midday, 2 former cabinet members had publicly distanced themselves from him. One issued a vague statement. If these documents are authentic, they raise serious constitutional concerns. Pence's legal team issued a rushed denial. "We categorically reject any implication of wrongdoing." Vice President Pence acted with integrity and in America's best interests. But it was too late. In Ohio, voters were already calling into radio stations, furious. This man sat on stage and called J.D. Vance a puppet. "Look in the mirror," one caller shouted. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, stepped onto the Senate floor for an unscheduled address. C-SPAN's cameras caught every word. "I didn't ask for this fight," he began. "But I won't walk away from it either. The red folder is not just evidence, it's a warning." He held up a copy of one of the memos. "Let this serve notice to every official who thinks public office is a private bank account, that people are watching. And I will not stop until they get the truth." For 30 seconds, no one clapped. Then the applause came not from fellow senators, but from the gallery above. Ordinary citizens who had come to see what democracy looked like under pressure. Outside, barricades had been erected. Protesters and counter-protesters chanted across the street from each other. Some signs read, "Trump's shadow, Vance's truth." Others read, "Pence saved the Constitution." But inside the intelligence community, another war had started. A former NSA cyber analyst contacted J.D. Vance's chief of staff. She said the leak had triggered something deeper, a data flag buried inside Pence's encrypted archive. Timed. To release if accessed incorrectly. What does that mean? The chief of staff asked. The analyst replied. It means Pence knew the documents might leak, and he left a trap behind. By 8 p.m., several Capitol Hill offices went dark. The network went down temporarily. A cyber forensics team was dispatched. Within minutes, a senior aide to the Speaker of the House confirmed what everyone feared. Someone was deleting archived national security documents remotely. J.D. Vance was rushed to a secure location, and Mike Pence. He was on a private jet reportedly bound for Lisbon. Portugal, country with no extradition treaty for financial crimes with the U.S. news anchors, struggled to keep up with the headlines. Live panels argued about treason, loyalty, and the new power dynamic inside the Republican Party. One analyst on a primetime debate said, "This isn't about Trump. It's about the soul of the right." J.D. Vance isn't just exposing Pence. He's reshaping the future. The next morning, the last file from the red folder would be released. And insiders whispered that this one contained not just money trails, but names. Powerful names, the kind that never appear in public, the kind that pulls strings from behind the curtain. And J.D. Vance was prepared to burn it all down. The last file dropped at 7:04 a.m. It was titled Umbra List Subledger B. No warning, no watermark, no encryption. The contents exploded across the digital world within seconds. A spreadsheet of secret donors, intelligence briefings, and unauthorized surveillance reports detailing how select members of Congress, corporate leaders, and 2 sitting federal judges had coordinated private influence campaigns tied to energy lobbying in Eastern Europe. And at the top of the file, a memo with Mike Pence's digital signature dated December 20th, 2020. J.D. Vance is ambitious. Control him or isolate him. Avoid confrontation until post-inauguration. Trump must not suspect. By noon, all television networks had cleared their regular programming. A live emergency broadcast had been called by Senate leadership. Outside the Capitol, more than 10,000 citizens had gathered, some in support of Vance. Others still holding banners that read Defend Pence. Defend. Decency. Inside the Senate chamber was unnaturally quiet. J.D. Vance stood alone at the podium, stack of red folder documents beside him. His suit looked wrinkled, his voice tired but unbroken. "This isn't about a puppet or a president," he said slowly. "It's about how deep the rot goes, about what we've let happen under the name of national interest." His voice echoed off the marble walls. "I was called a puppet, so I cut the strings." The gallery above was full reporters, diplomats, even former presidents watching. From the back, one former CIA director reportedly turned pale when he saw his name flash on the live broadcast feed. "I didn't leak these files to punish Mike Pence," Vance continued. "I released them because truth doesn't belong in vaults, it belongs in daylight." An aide handed him a letter. It was a signed confession from a former Treasury official, confirming offshore redirections of stimulus aid. Money meant for pandemic relief that had ended up in European shell companies tied to the Umbra network. Silence then. Murmurs. Then shouts. Senators rose to their feet. Some began demanding a full investigation. Others stormed out, their faces blank. Phones buzzed nonstop. At least one arrest was made just off camera and IT. Contractor in the gallery caught trying to live stream restricted audio feeds. And then came the moment no one expected. Mike Pence walked into the chamber alone. No security detail. No legal team. His eyes were sunken, his tie crooked. He stopped just short of the podium and looked at J.D. Vance, who didn't move, didn't blink. Pence cleared his throat. "I made mistakes," he said. There was no microphone. No echo. "I thought restraint was patriotism. I thought compromise was leadership." Then he looked directly into the C-SPAN camera. "But I failed to see that silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's cowardice." A moment of deep stillness followed. Then Pence walked out. No statement, no press conference, no apology outside. News anchors struggled to describe what had just happened. Was it a confession, a collapse, or a warning? But the story wasn't over. 2 hours later, the president of Ukraine gave a surprise press briefing in Kyiv. He confirmed that American operatives had offered to pressure his administration to delay energy contracts with China in exchange for untraceable donations. Correspondence that now matched names on the Umbra list. One question ricocheted around the world. Had Mike Pence tried to shape foreign energy policy outside of Trump's knowledge? By nightfall, the White House had issued a brief statement. Vice President Vance acted independently and responsibly. No member of the executive branch was involved in these financial schemes. We support transparency and await full congressional coursenac. I'll see it on my scanner, at my course, like you're gonna die. Like, look at this. And we all know I've been exploring that. And we all know I've been exploring that path. I'll see one matey of where I'll know we a give not where are you again with $1. We support Cliscord wills. We support transparency and await. I will leave. Cal with unflows again with the IDs to see if we leave for you with we see with thar sakai to you could ake we to with lead a koi kasai to we to see we sa sick you so you can to inquiry. But behind the scenes, the fallout was just beginning. DOJ had opened a sealed probe. 3 senators had retained criminal defense attorneys. Foreign embassies requested emergency bilateral discussions. J.D. Vance, now guarded by federal agents, spoke briefly with reporters on his way into a secure committee room. This isn't about one man, he said. It's about cleaning out a system that feeds on silence. He paused, eyes scanning the chaos around him. And I'm not done yet. That night, a final clip aired on Newsline International Law, never before seen backstage recording from the original D.C. event that had showed J.D. Vance walking off stage after Pence's puppet comment. A camera mic caught him whispering to his aide, "He doesn't know what I found in Geneva." The screen cut to black dot and the world leaned in. For whatever was coming next. The end.